Willow. Season 9, Chapter 7, Juggling Dogs. Scars are weird. Most people think of them as blemishes and deformities, imperfections that curse our skin, making the pristine tarnished, the perfect flawed, and the pure desecrate. I'm not going to pretend I was immune to that way of thinking myself. The first time I got an oven burn on the small of my wrist, I was distraught that it would not heal completely, that it would leave a permanent line testifying to my clumsiness. I considered wearing bracelets, but such jewelry in the kitchen is inconvenient at best, frowned upon, and outright barred at worst. In time, that first mark has grown pale and thin. The line has also been joined by a myriad of others, some more shallow, others wide and deep. Each was a lesson learned, but mostly they taught me that the little cuts and scrapes and burns and blisters are all part of being a cook. Within a month of that initial burn, I'd completely changed my perspective. Scars don't mar the skin, they tell its story. The number of lines on my wrists testifies to my experience as a baker. The cuts on my fingers trace the path it took before I knew how to properly slice and dice vegetables. That one badly healed gash on my left ring finger's knuckle taught me not to toss my chef's knife around. That little white score at the tip of my right index reminds me not to keep an unsheathed fillet knife in my purse. Now, I realize how amazing scars are. Blood clots then transports material the body uses to create flesh, blood vessels, skin, even bones when needed. And sometimes the original blueprints aren't available, or the rebuilding project is rushed for efficiency. The final results aren't as good or as pretty as the original build, but still, what a miracle. Obviously, I'm no stranger to scars. I've dozens, if not hundreds, of various shapes, sizes, and placements. The big ones are the most fascinating, though. The ones that cover large surfaces, like that scraped knee from falling off my bike, or that cut on my knuckles. The ones where nerves were severed, sliced, or torn and didn't heal quite right. These never feel as they should. They tickle at the slightest touch or lack sensitivity over one patch while being hypersensitive on another. Sometimes they sting or itch without provocation. And that's all well and good when I'm poking around my own scars, touching and testing how they feel instead of fidgeting around or out of boredom. When it's someone else poking at my scars, especially with little care and no concern, it's a whole other story. "This is incredible!" Thomas Sinclair's awe is evident in his whisper. "I wish I could have seen it before it was healed." Thomas spent most of the day in the cafe, eating cookies and drinking coffee, which sounds normal until you factor in that I had to cut him off the caffeine an hour before the lunch rush. The already excitable podcaster was positively vibrating with energy when he walked in. The stimulants threatened to make his heart explode. Normally, after such an exciting evening and the associated overthinking, I wake up exhausted. Despite the previous night's events, however, I've been coasting through most of my shift. No one would claim that I'm at my most focused, but I'm not as bone-weary as I've been on other similar occasions. Part of me wonders if it's a side effect of Philomen's broth, though most likely I'm still riding high on the intoxication of newfound possibilities. It's like when you first learn to make choux or meringue. The next day will be nothing but thoughts of what potential is now unlocked. And now I've got Thomas Sinclair riding just as awestruck. I might as well have given him a formal introduction to Bigfoot and invited him to Mothman's birthday party. "I don't think you do," I object, pulling my hand away from his probing fingers. It wasn't pretty to look at, or pleasant to smell. Jittery and eager, he leans over the counter, nearly spilling the glass of orange juice I just served him. His voice is too loud and his manners too brusque. I should have waited until after my shift to tell him of my encounter with Philomen and my own miraculous healing of Annabelle's cut. But let's face it, I, too, am excited at the possibility.
And you can do this yourself?
He asks for what must be the third time. I can, I confirm. I have. And maybe I could again, I think, taking a quick look at the crochet canary on the counter. A spark ignites in Sinclair's eyes, the bright embryo of a bad idea, like a star being born. With as much discretion and decorum as one of the raccoons, he reaches behind the counter and into the bussing tray, pulling out the sharpest implement he can get his grubby hands on. He then holds the utensil in his right fist, having it hover over the back of his left hand. He's got that smile of someone up to mischief. It's how I imagine the drunk to look as they're about to say, "Watch this."
So,
he says, thirsty and dangerous.
If I stab my hand, you could fix it?
There's a quick second when I think he's going to do it, that Thomas Sinclair will drive down the utensil into the back of his hand just so he, too, can experience the magic. If anyone has a thirst for that kind of thing, it would be him, if only for the story and the content. Before he can prove me right, I snatch the butter knife away from him, dropping it back into the bussing tray. It's sticky with dry blueberry jam, and I have to wipe my fingers off on my apron.
I could,
I answer, but don't presume I would. Maybe I'd let you learn a lesson instead. The threat isn't quite enough to sober him up, but he does sit back down on his stool to quietly take a sip of his orange juice. Just in time for the door chimes to announce a fresh customer. As much as I appreciate his help and expertise, if you can call it such, hanging out with Thomas is somewhere between juggling and dog-sitting, or juggling dogs.
Chai latte,
a familiar voice demands from the counter.
And a plain croissant.
Ophelia is standing there, wearing a long skirt, loose blouse, and one of her ever-present shawls. The head of her orange cat is poking out of her bag, sniffing the air hungrily, inspecting the aquilo for any unfamiliar scents.
I know what you drink,
I reassure her.
Yet you managed to get it wrong last time. If a free precaution on my part saves you from having to redo my order.
The same barbs that used to dig into my skin 2 years ago roll off my back, doing very little damage on their way. Sure, Ophelia remains irritating, but I've come to appreciate that this is, and will always be, who she is with me.
Green tea and a chocolate chip cookie,
I say, mocking her order and sticking out my tongue. She doesn't bother acknowledging me with anything more than a thin smile. It doesn't last, however. It only takes a moment before she realizes the counter isn't empty and the sole occupant isn't from our usual club of witches and misfits. Seeing Thomas Sinclair seems to deflate Ophelia, and it's only with a begrudging sigh that she accepts to take a seat beside the exuberant podcaster. Quiet, reserved, and with selfish poise, she starts to take out her yarn and needles, ready to get on with whatever project she has going. She seems content to allow Thomas to tire himself out and leave before engaging in any conversation of her own. Like a dog on too long a leash, however, Thomas reaches over and puts his nose into everything Ophelia is attempting to do.
Did you know Miriam can heal wounds with, what was it, a salad?
For once, I feel a measure of pity towards Ophelia. The way she straightens her back, looks straight ahead, and takes a deep breath, I understand that she is steeling herself with patience. Like a dog's bark, there is no escape from the noises coming out of the podcaster's mouth.
And?
She asks, dismissing his question while looping a strand of blue yarn around her needle.
Healing spells are peculiar, but not exactly difficult. Every novelty magic book has a dozen spells for healing the soul, detoxifying, improving health. Weren't you there a couple of years ago when I saved her girlfriend with a scarf?
Thomas looks at me, then back at the corner of the cafe we turned into a makeshift podcasting studio so long ago. We damn near killed Vicky Paramore there, all so we could capture a demon. Sinclair was there. He helped set everything up. He had a green screen, microphones, everything. All for a recording he knew was artifice.
But that was different,
he explains, as if he knew better than either Ophelia or me.
That was because of the parasite that came out of that woman. If you can just heal wounds with a scarf or a salad, you'd find a way to use that power, right? Empty the hospitals? Package it as a miracle cure? You wouldn't just let people suffer, would you?
I look back at the register, the little yellow canary, and I wonder. It was always my assumption, much like Thomas, that the scarf and Vicky was a special case, that there was something specific that made the miracle a reality. The way Ophelia is talking, though, the kind of healing spell I've been marveling at is no big deal. Makes me wonder if perhaps Thomas doesn't have a point, that maybe people with knowledge like Ophelia and me could be doing more.
It is different,
Ophelia explains, rolling her eyes without interrupting her knitting.
You can't just manufacture a hex, a blessing, or a spell. Who did you heal?
While I know deep down she's a more educated witch than I am, it always stings when Ophelia gets to spread that knowledge like so much chocolate spread on toast. I'm glad for the opportunity to learn, but the way she revels in the gap of knowledge between us pulls at my nerves. She had mentorship in her art, which I lacked.
Annabelle,
I say, trying not to sound like I'm being schooled.
She cut herself at Louis last night. Bad cut. Wouldn't let me take her to the hospital. See?
She continues, a satisfied smirk on her lips.
You know Annabelle. You care for her. You knew how she got hurt. Intent in your ritual was heartfelt, genuine, and profound. You can't mass produce that. You can't put it in a box.
Oh, Sinclair says in reserved awe.
That would explain your wound, Miriam. Of course Philomene would have the intent and familiarity to heal you. With all of your experience at this point, it must have been a breeze for her to teach you.
He smiles at me, so proud of the connection he just made. Meanwhile, from next to him, Ophelia is raising her head. Gone is the arrogance and pride, replaced instead by an expression of betrayal and anger.
I'm sorry,
she seethes.
Philomene did what?
I step outside in the blazing sun, hit by the weather paradox of the Northeast. The sky is clear and bright, with light flooding the streets, casting cars and buildings into neatly cut shadows. Meanwhile, the temperature is as chilly as it's been since spring. Nature's artifice, pretending to be one thing while doing another. Catching up to Ophelia isn't difficult. She doesn't have the footwear or dress to make an effective escape. Though, as far as a dramatic exit, she nailed it. Heels tapping loudly on the tiles of the dining room, swinging the front door open in anger, causing the chimes to ring in cacophony. Her long dress skirt catching in the wind as she storms onto the sidewalk. There was a time when I would have gladly allowed her to walk away, leaving her latte and croissant on the counter. They're already paid for, after all, so why should I care? Those days are, for better or worse, behind me. Through mutually learning more of each other and shared trauma, she's become somewhat of a friend, though a most challenging one on the best of days. While I hate to leave my cafe unattended, I have to see about my frustrating friend.
Wait,
I call out, still holding the door open behind me.
It's not what you think.
For a second, I expect her to keep stomping away, massive bag over her shoulder, shawl wrapped around her neck. She goes on for a few more steps, perhaps even accelerating a little, but with a final stomping of her heel, she stops. I can almost hear the grinding of her teeth over the passing cars as she turns around. It's not the first time I've seen this facial expression on her, and it reminds me once again that small in stature she may be, Ophelia is more dangerous than she looks. This isn't a case of envying her knowledge and education, though. I'm not thinking of the time she went out of her way to insult my skills and belittle my efforts. I'm remembering a night in the cemetery just a few blocks from where we stand, when she stopped a magical creature in its tracks with nothing but a needle and a piece of knitwear. I saw her essentially stitch the animal in place so it would not interfere with our business. Would she make such a vulgar display of power here, in broad daylight in the middle of Aquilow's busiest street? Probably not, but her hatred of Philomene runs deep, far deeper than I've managed to explore yet. Please, I implore, with the same voice I use to soothe annoyed customers and angry patrons. Hear me out. 20 feet separate us, and our theatrics are starting to attract attention. A pair of white-robed pilvists distributing flyers watch us from across the street. A man about to get into his blue Honda Civic stops to observe our confrontation. Ophelia notices them too, turning around to continue walking. She makes it a few paces before stopping again and looking over her shoulder to hiss. "Well, come along." The sounds and smell of the Aquilo Cafe still pour out from the open door. I can feel the eyes of Thomas Sinclair watching me, along with that of half the patrons in the dining room. I loathe to leave my establishment unsupervised, especially with Thomas in there. It's not so much that he's ravenous, but rather his lack of respect for personal space and property. Might as well give free rein to the Don and his raccoon court. There's nothing in the oven to burn, nothing on the stove to boil over. The lunch rush should begin within half an hour, and who knows how long it'll take to de-escalate this, but I don't feel like I have a choice. Gaining Ophelia's trust isn't a hill I want to have to climb more than once, and I'm not quite done working through her enigmas. "For Gulliver," I mumble to myself, letting go of the Aquilo's door to follow in her steps. The bright, near-noon sun warms the pavement and concrete, giving the illusion of comfort, but every time I step in the shadow of a political sign, goose flesh covers my skin. Ophelia doesn't wait for me before going on her merry way, forcing me to jog after her to catch up. "I didn't take Philomene up on her offer," I start explaining the moment I'm within earshot. But almost immediately she shushes me, frowning matron-like as she puts a finger to her lips. "Not here. Look around. I'm not discussing our family history within earshot of those weirdos." She's right. I still see the Pilvists as harmless cloud worshippers. Despite the return of Philomene, the strange magic of Phyllis Baker, and Ian's fanatical awe over Dufour spells, it's difficult to think of them as dangerous. Right, I agree. I don't know where she's taking us, but I hope it's close. Rubbing my shoulders, we pass by the well-heated city hall and then the Aquilo Parish Church, a safe haven from the occasional gust of northern wind. Alas, neither offers the isolation that Ophelia seeks. Instead, she takes me to the very open, very cold Aquilo Border Park. If I'd thought of grabbing a jacket, or even just a scarf, I'd have been happy with her choice. As it is, I might freeze to death before hearing the last of her admonishments. "How did you do it then?" Ophelia asks, while guiding us down the gravel paths that circle the park. "The way you talked about how she sealed your wound, I thought that sort of thing was far beyond your modest level of skill. To be honest, I didn't think myself capable either. Until Philomene healed my hand, I assumed the best we could do was those little spells to free ghosts and heal the soul. Mending a wound feels so potent." Ophelia doesn't reply, not immediately. Usually, she would jump at the chance to exploit my self-deprecation, especially with a good cause. This time, she looks more preoccupied than predatory, her eyes scouting the park like two brown cameras taking valuable footage. She seems particularly interested in the giant stump in the middle of the park. "I'm still revolted over how you let her use your kitchen uncontested. Take your ingredients, borrow your utensils and stove. I thought you Dufour were precious about that sort of thing." I want to explain that it's not about being possessive of my tools, but rather that in a professional kitchen, a certain degree of protocol needs to be maintained, but I doubt excuses and technicalities will move the conversation forward. And the shivers in my arm want the conversation to be done with post-haste. "I was incapacitated," I admit. "The wound was infected, I had a fever, and I was dead tired. Honestly, I'm lucky someone found me." I show her the back of my burned hand as proof and emphasis, both of the severity of the damage and the miracle of its repair. All Ophelia does is raise her nose in disgust. Too stubborn to seek care until it was too late. I nod. She knows me as only old enemies know each other. To her credit, there's little malice in the accusation, and her features soften at last. We walk for another minute or two, the cold biting deeper into my skin with every step. Even Ophelia, with her long-sleeve blouse, skirt, and shawl, shivers a little, though it could just as easily be from her own thoughts as the weather.
And she asks for nothing in return.
That's the question, isn't it? What does Philomene want? She disappeared for decades, only to reappear using foul tricks and magics that I've yet to even begin to understand. But why? The woman would be pushing 130 years old, yet she defies death. To what purpose?
No, I explained, sticking to the essentials. Only offered to mentor me like she says Doris should have. Was very insistent about the whole deal.
We keep walking, cold creeping up my spine and making my teeth chatter. It's still above freezing, but the discomfort is no less real. Winter's footsteps getting louder with every passing week. After another moment of contemplation, Ophelia sighs and plunges her hand inside her massive knitting bag. I hear the annoyed growl and meowing of an irritated familiar as she rummages around. "Here," she says, pulling out a luxurious-looking thick wool scarf. It's a beautiful lavender, which isn't exactly my color, but even without touching it, I can tell how warm and soft the knitting is. Yet, even after she puts it in my hands, all I do is hold it between my fingers, staring down my benefactor with an unspoken question.
"Oh, for crying out loud!"
She rolls her eyes, taking the scarf back and forcing it around my neck and covering my shoulders.
"Not everything I make is nefarious. Here."
She finishes placing the garment on my body, making sure to tie it in a loose knot so it doesn't fall off. The moment she's done, taking a step back to inspect her handiwork, I feel the magic. Up close, I can see that there's 2 tones of light purple in the knitting. Subtle differences that are barely visible depict a pattern of flames and fire. Iconography stitched into the scarf with intent, I assume, and I feel the effects almost immediately. The cold weather relinquishes its grip on me, pushed away by a cozy, unnatural warmth. My face flushes with welcome heat, and the feeling returns to the tip of my nose and fingers. I've felt this effect before from spiced coffee and ginger tea that I serve on the coldest winter evenings. Satisfied with her display of power, and perhaps even with being helpful, Ophelia stretches her thin lips into a smile and keeps on walking.
"But you healed Annabelle without Philomene's help?"
she asks as I catch up.
"And you won't be accepting the offer?"
I shake my head, not willing to admit that I hadn't made a definitive choice yet.
"Good,"
Ophelia continues, apparently satisfied.
"This isn't an old witch you can trust, Miriam. And if you were to become her apprentice, to work with her, to learn her ways, well, I don't know that you and I could remain friends."
I think again of the fox in the cemetery and pay attention to the comforting warmth that fills my entire body at this point. It wouldn't be the first time Ophelia considered me her enemy. This, however, would be an entirely different situation, I feel. I expect disaster of one kind as I'm on my way back to the Aquillow. Warm and safe as I am in Ophelia's scarf, does she expect me to give this back? There's a growing pit in my stomach as I consider what I've left behind. The sun is reaching its zenith, threatening noon. Sidewalks, usually calm and empty, are filling with people rushing to get things done in the 1 hour they have in the middle of the day. Some go home for a moment to feed the dog. Others run errands they might not have time for in the evening. Most are going to grab a bite to eat. There are 4 places one can get a quick meal in Aquillow during lunch. 5 if you count Louie's frozen pizza bites and grilled cheese. If you're fancy, you can go to the Lady Godiva and get some expensive drinks and a charcuterie board. There's the Italian place across from the park that serves a decent and affordable slice of lasagna and in less than 5 minutes. But if time and money are the real issue, you can stop by the little grocery and pick up a ready-to-go sandwich meal deal. Stale bread, plastic cheese, cold cuts, a drink, and a bag of chips for less than $10. Most people, however, will go where quality and variety abound, justifying any price demanded. Of course, I'm talking about the Aquilo Cafe. Strip down all the magic and mystery from our little town, and my coffee shop remains the most enchanting place to eat. You don't need spells and witchcraft if you can fix a decent marinade or bake an incredible cheesecake. However, right this minute, all these earthly delights remain unsupervised. It's like leaving the dog in the kitchen with a roast on the counter. Even if the pooch is well behaved, how long can I expect him to control his most basic instincts? What will I find when I arrive at the Aquilo Cafe? Angry customers storming out for lack of service? The back door open with half a dozen raccoons setting up shop in the pastry display? A podcaster rummaging through my kitchen, stacking up ingredients into a towering Dagwood sandwich? With luck, one of my more responsible regulars, like Annabelle or Olivia, will have noticed the empty cafe and stepped in until I return. They know the place just about as much as I do, and Olivia is even more familiar with the customers than I am. With mounting anxiety, I accelerate my pace, walking back across the park and down Rue Principale. It's a short enough distance, and there seems to be no commotion in front of my establishment, but short of breaking into a jog, I still keep my pace brisk. I grab the door handle and hold my breath, wondering what fresh hell I'll be stepping into, and walk in. The chimes sing me in, and I see nothing. Nothing out of the ordinary. As expected, there is a line in front of the register, mostly people who have office jobs on or around Rue Principale and Main Street, people from City Hall or the bank, Ben the accountant and Michael the painter, regulars waiting for their usual and whatever treat I might have ready for lunch. My brother's there, too, in the middle of the line, pointing at an imaginary watch on his naked wrist, taunting me for my absence. He's wearing one of those thick turtleneck sweaters that is somehow both warm and revealing. But I ignore his teasing, and I ignore the regulars. There's a situation brewing that I had not anticipated. A mix of flavors that I had not intended. Ingredients that have no business being on the same plate, mixing their juices in a nauseating sauce. Sitting on his stool, having not moved an inch, though I think he has a fresh bottle of orange juice in front of him, is Thomas Sinclair. Again, he's holding court, entertaining the few customers gathered around him. He's unusually quiet, his voice doing little to compete with the instrumental folk music that's currently on the speakers. While I don't like him bothering the customers, especially during lunch when many of them are on a tight schedule, I'm far more alarmed with who he's entertaining. What fresh hell is this? I growl under my breath. Orleans and Alessandria, the accursed Inquisition. Both are standing in similar positions, like two action figures from the same collection. Backs straight, fingers intertwined in front of them like monks in prayer. Their uniforms are the same as the day I first met them, and just as pristine. The sun catches on Orleans' gold cruciform cufflink, reminding me of who I'm dealing with. And they're listening to the most voluble, garrulous human being on earth. Thomas made a living spilling beans and opening cans of worms. He's never met a secret he didn't want to expose. Inviting him back to Aquilo was always a risk, but I never dreamed he'd be left unsupervised with the Inquisition of all people. Is it too late for me to make a run for it?
Ah,
Orleans says, noticing my arrival.
Missed you 4. We were just looking for you.
I make my way around the counter while keeping an eye on the short inquisitor. He broadens his smile, and I deepen my frown. Thrice now I've trusted these two, and each time it came with a price, some of which I have yet to finish paying.
Interesting scarf,
Alessandria says, making naked her accusation.
Not your usual palette.
I didn't picture the tall and taciturn inquisitor to have much of a fashion sense. At least, not enough to notice I'm more of an autumn than a spring. Be that as it may, I see through her words. They know of Ophelia. They know because I sent them after her. Once I get to the register, I take off the garment, folding it with care and tucking it under the counter with my spare apron and tea towels. As I get up to face my patiently waiting customers, it's with a smile worthy of the best customer service. "I'm so sorry for the delay," I apologize to a skinny but elegant woman wearing a sharp blue blazer and matching pencil skirt. She's a lawyer who works all the way down Main Street, and I know she'll be late getting back to the office. "Your usual? I'll throw in a cookie as an apology." "It's okay," she says, whatever frustration she held melting away at the offer. "But I'll definitely take the cookie. Any pecan sandies today?" I don't have any of the requested treat, but we compromise with a cashew and caramel delight instead. Once gone, I move on to the next customer and repeat the apology and the offer. Edgar Cook bargains for a muffin instead, which I begrudgingly accept. Others down the line are quick to realize that they, too, can take advantage. Even Eric twists his neck to see what we've got in the pastry display. It's not ideal, but I'll take the hit. Better to lose some profit today than customers tomorrow. Imagine the blow to my ego if I found any of them getting meal deals at the grocery instead. "Miss Dufour," Orleans tries to interrupt as I serve Babs McCord her lunch, tea, and sandwich, but I ignore him. "Miss Dufour, we've been waiting to talk to you." "The line starts at the door," I answer, not even giving him the courtesy of a glance. "I want them to give up and go away. I'll deal with Thomas in due time, but first I need them gone." But the Inquisition is not a problem easily ignored. "Miss Dufour." Orleans tries his luck again, but I don't allow him. "Back of the line, please." It's what I would do with any customer that tried to cut to the front, but probably with less vitriol in my voice. The short Inquisitor relents at last, putting up his hands while nodding with his eyes closed. "My apologies," he seems to say with a gesture. "Well, do as you wish." Without another word, he picks up his leather attaché and starts to make his way down to wait his turn. I'll still have to deal with him, but it's a small victory to have put my foot down and enforced my authority. The Ache Willow is my cafe, my domain, and I'll be damned if I get bullied while here. At least, that's what I'd like to think. But Orleans' partner has a different opinion and a different version of tact. "Miss Dufour," she positively bellows, "enough is enough." My jaw tightens and I can feel the bones in my body rattle at her words. Orleans is a devious but friendly sort, a zealot, but one that follows a certain personal code of ethics. He's not above disrupting the lives of others, however, doing so only after careful planning and only when the timing is right. Alessandria is a different fanatic altogether. She's the one you throw at the temple doors to brace them, or throw them open. Both are true believers, but she's one to savor the violence her cause allows her. All is just in the church's name, and if that means bones must be broken and blood must be spilled, then Alessandria will gladly be a vessel for such force. "Back of the line," I say, voice trembling. "Please." I catch a glimpse of my brother stepping away from the other waiting customers, ready to play bouncer for his little sister if required. Bless his massive, muscular heart, Alessandria would obliterate him. "We're not here for you, Miss Dufour," she continues, her voice quiet but stern. "Nor are we here for the little knitter. We've already taken care of her." There's surprisingly little glee in her declaring victory on Ophelia. They did a good job of taking her business from her and keeping her activities in Aquilo to a minimum. But there's a scarf under my counter that proves they've yet to claim complete victory. The oversized Inquisitor leans in, and Eric flinches, but there's no need for his flexing. Alessandria isn't reaching to throttle me or pull me limb from limb. Quite the contrary, she instead locks eyes with me and lowers her voice to a whisper worthy of a soft summer breeze. It's shocking to see she can be subtle when circumstances demand it. "We're here for your ancestor," she says. "We are here for Philemon Dufour." Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Blue Sky, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.